Sure.
Hello? I think everyone should be able to hear us now. Um,
Cool.
Hello. I'm joined by Roxana.
Yep.
You do a podcast, don't you, called Talk with
Yes.
Rox?
It's called Meet Your Inner Child. I just changed it recently.
We've talked before. I've been on your show with you previously. I think it was when not long after the Section 47.1 sort of come into play, and we were talking about it then.
Yeah.
So I've asked you to join me because we've had a lot of amicus brief filings recently, and I wanted to get your views on that. Do you want to explain to people what it is you do?
Yeah, sure. So I do psychotherapy. I'm a licensed therapist in California, and I also host a podcast on consciousness and inner child work. And I got really interested in this case because I felt like there was such clear, like egoic inner child wounding going on. And so I really started following it for that. And also because, I have DV in my background as well, and I have clients who have it and was looking forward to the story and kind of experiencing it through this more public on the stage lens in a positive way. And that's what I do and what my interest is in it. So yeah, we did get to talk, and it really is so crazy how every day it feels like there's just more and more content and back and forth that comes up around this.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I think because I know I've been quite open. I've come in this as well as not from a legal perspective, not from my sort of professional, but as a human, as a person with my experience, a very abusive marriage, and
Yeah.
I knew of Justin Baldoni. I wouldn't say I was a fan. I mean, I like his stuff, but I'm not a fan.
Yeah.
I didn't start as a fan anyway. I am now, but I know how he takes sense, like the difficult topics and what he can turn them into, how he handles them, and I was really hopeful with this film, and I feel quite disappointed with how it's been used as more of a Blake Lively show, and
Yeah.
a marketing opportunity for alcohol of all things, which is in poor taste, but also hair care products and things that usually when people are in a situation of domestic violence, hair care
Yeah.
products are the last thing on their mind.
Right. Yeah.
It was for me. I'm not speaking for everyone, but for me, it was certainly like not something I was particularly like. Oh, well, what hair care products can I use, etc.
No, you're
Um,
thinking
but
safety.
yeah. So we've had all these amicus briefs. I'm sorry if there's background noise. I can't help that.
No.
Um, we've had all these amicus briefs. There's all these charities for sort of domestic violence and sexual violence all seem to be queuing up to come out in support of Blake Lively. What do you
Yeah.
think of that?
I think it's so interesting. Honestly, when I first heard that, I thought it sort of makes sense in thinking about how she got Brandon Sklenar and the young Lily, everybody kind of on her side. I think it's almost the same thing that these organizations probably felt like there was an opportunity also to uplift their organizations through a big name versus really understanding what's going on. I feel like I should say too, like I was not a fan of Justin Baldoni. If anything, before this, I was a fan of Blake Lively. But through this experience, my opinion has really changed. And I do think that that's kind of what the allure is for these organizations. I'm curious to know more about it and hear what you think too.
Well, because I've done a few videos on this, and I've obviously done the
Yeah.
threads as well as they're coming out. And what strikes me is firstly, amicus briefs are normally supposed to be quite neutral. They're supposed to
Mm,
provide some information that may help the court, but they're literally, you know, amicus curiae actually means friend of the court.
mm,
They're not supposed to come out in support of any particular parties, but they are.
right.
um, and then they are. I'm trying to figure out how to sort of word it. You know, they're using the language they're using. It's like this is a done deal. They're referring to Wayfarer's claims as meritless, baseless, and I'm, you know, in their throughout their briefs, and I find that really bizarre because we've not seen any evidence that there's anything, you know, baseless about them at all. In fact, we've seen so far what we've seen has been quite the opposite, and I think that's largely, you know, the majority opinion on what we've seen from evidence. But they're trying to stop it from, they're trying to get it dismissed from even the discovery point, and that's not the purpose of Section 47.1.
Hmm. It doesn't really make sense, right? That is something that I think everyone's kind of who's invested in this case interested in is that there isn't any evidence. And I think Blake's whole thing that she's been running on, so to speak, is believe women, period. And I think the interest is around no, don't believe women, period. There has to be some sense of evidence provided or your emotional distress provided, which she's now also walking back from. So I don't know
Yeah.
why these organizations would also want to support that just kind of blatant belief of moving forward.
No, and it does. I mean, I find, I mean, it's hard for me to kind of go too far with this, but I obviously I look at the situation, I look at the law, and I think, you know, and I form opinions like everyone else. And obviously, you've got some constitutional issues. I think here because
Mm,
there is, you know, there's right to free speech. I understand that, but you know, there are some limits. It can't be malicious, and it has to be true. But there are I'm trying to think. What the words now? I'm trying to think. But like
yeah,
people are entitled to due process, and this is what is bothering me about these amicus briefs is they're arguing for that to be done away, stripped away, and you know, basically we'll avoid all that, and you know, she should not have to go through anything at all to have her claims tested. And I've been through the process myself, both in, you know, well, in the criminal for me it was, which is incredibly hard.
very
But you know, like why wouldn't you, if you were confident in what your claims and your complaint, why would you not want to, well, not that you'd want to, but you know, I think most people would understand why you have to be cross-examined, why you have to provide evidence,
right.
you know, as a
Right.
starting
Yeah.
point for most things. And one of the things I said yesterday is, well, they're seeking to prevent, they're calling it the discovery process in the lawsuit abusive. But if you had followed through with SAG-AFTRA, with the CRD, with the EEOC, with, you know, any other avenue of a complaint, the complaint would be investigated.
Right.
And Wayfarer would be able to say, give their version without it being called, labeled as retaliation.
Yeah.
Does that make some sense? But they're
It
trying
does.
to change the rules here a little bit.
Yeah, and this rule doesn't make sense to me, right? You can't say, just believe me, period. This is what happened. There has to be some investigative process to it because otherwise then how do we also protect men from this,
Yeah.
situation? And maybe people are very much still in a place of like we don't need to protect them or whatever, but people lie sometimes and it's important for the whole legal process to create some safety around that.
Yeah, and this could apply to women as well, because a woman could equally be accused of falsely
True.
um you know, of sexual harassment.
Yeah.
This isn't even just, you know, it's being sort of packaged as a, you know, we need to save all these women type of
Yeah.
law, but in reality, women are kind of being put in the crosshairs of being in a situation where they may be falsely accused of something, and then they get shouted down if they try to deny it. I mean,
Right.
I think in any situation, if someone is falsely accused of something, it's almost instinctive to say, "I didn't do that."
Right. Defend yourself.
At least, yeah. And
Yeah.
one of the things they presented in yesterday, so it was an amicus brief of 14 sort of organizations. So some of
Wow.
whom I believe, or there were some members of, I'm not 100% sure,
Mm.
may have been at the Another Simple Favor premiere,
Wow.
posing
And
with
what
Blake Lively in Texas.
why would they have any involvement with that?
Exactly. Someone has found links to that, but I'll be speaking to that person later on to kind of
Yeah.
try and nail that down a bit. But yes, that link has been kind of, it's done the rounds a few times, but it's come back into play now. Um, what one of the studies they put in this as well, this is evidence in this brief that came out yesterday was um there was a study done where they went into like I think it was a college level.
Hmm.
So they went into to a group of college students, and they kind of gave all these lists of what would be classed as DARVO sort of terminology, and
Mhm.
then they get asked them to recall a personal scenario that they had been in, and where they'd been falsely accused of anything, not even just sexual harassment or sexual violence, like of anything,
Right.
anytime you've been falsely accused of something. And the question was phrased as what was your DARVO? And I find that quite that's how we're kind of explaining
Hmm.
denying something to college students who are quite impressionable anyway. I have a problem with that. I find that a bit
Yeah.
gaslighting.
Right, or, like, leading the witness, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah, it's very strange, and I feel like it also could backfire for these organizations because then it feels like they're losing credibility. And the whole
Yeah.
thing, right, we spoke about this too on my podcast was like this makes it so much harder for survivors and people who have actually experienced sexual harassment to come forward.
Yeah. It does because you see the problem is right is I do think there is one area that I do agree with this section 47.1, and that is at the end of, because obviously this comes into play if someone has accused, not necessarily made a formal complaint, but they have to have had good faith grounds to have been in a place where they could have made a complaint. So you don't even have to file a complaint,
Mm,
and it's supposed to be for claims that are free of malice, so there can't be any malice involved. Well, the first problem is how do you get to a point where you prove that there's no malice? And
right.
that is usually past discovery. So to be arguing for Blake Lively to be dismissed before that point, it doesn't seem to fit with with the intention of the rule of the law. But also, um, and a thought process.
Yeah.
Um, um, I've forgotten the thought process I had then. That was a really good one.
Maybe it'll come back to you. It really feels like what I'm witnessing though too is that she's really just she's losing track, losing herself and almost like holding on to these threads of what else can I use without actually speaking up and sharing the lack of evidence that I have. Right? It's like let me throw out everything that I possibly have.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's getting a bit much because it's unusual to see these kind of amicus briefs anyway at
Yeah.
this level of the court. Normally they are commenting on cases that have already been heard in the district court or state court, and then they're at an appeal stage, and then you get these groups who maybe deal with people affected by the issues.
Right.
What we have here is people kind of clubbing together almost and kind of putting all together all these briefs
Yeah.
specifically for one party, and that is it. The one thing I did like about the section 47.1 is the fact that after you have got to the end and you've had the case heard and due process has been you know,
Mm.
observed and everything, then at that point, if the person who has experienced the harassment wins the defamation claim that is brought against them for speaking out, then at that point they get all the damages, the big heavy treble damages that come into play. I think the
Mm.
problem is what the law is trying to do is to help people who don't have the financial resources.
I
And
see.
in one of the amicus briefs yesterday, for the first time, because we hadn't seen this in any other amicus brief, they conceded that Blake Lively was not actually the intended beneficiary of this law because she has resources.
Right.
And then they threw in that, well, but even she is being, sued by a billionaire who's going to spend 100 million on her. And they stated that, I mean, that bothered me because they stated that as a
Yeah.
fact then on top of everything else. Like, and I've seen no evidence of that statement either.
Right.
And also recently it was used in an extortion attempt where, his daughter was threatened with kidnap. So I found that quite irresponsible.
Wow. Wait, who is this?
Steve Sarowitz.
His daughter was kidnapped as an extortion, and they're trying to
N-
bring that into the
no, she was.
yeah,
No, they threatened to kidnap her,
they
but on the
threatened.
like the ransom message, it was like, well, if you're going to
Oh,
prepared to spend $100 million on Miss Lively, then you'll be prepared to spend. I can't remember what it was, eighty
I
thousand dollars, I
see.
think, on your daughter. And then they threatened to kidnap her, but it didn't happen, thankfully.
Thankfully, yeah. No, that's ridiculous. Yeah. Yeah, it's really sad to see, and it doesn't make sense. And so something I think I read that you might have tweeted about too is that the lawyer or the judge, I'm sorry, doesn't really even need to take these into consideration. Is that right? Or how does it work?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've had some back and forth over the rules of these amicus briefs. Um, there are no rules for district court level, but
Mm.
what they've done, so the amicus briefs themselves are not formally filed on the docket right now. What you have to do is you file a motion requesting permission for them to be filed, but as part of that, you've also got to send a draft of what you're proposing to file. So
Yeah.
they're not actually formally been accepted onto the docket yet. They are still pending. The judge has a few options here now because this is
Mm.
so unusual for this level. And I could not say what he's going to do at all. So he
Sure.
could say no. Brian Friedman has said, well, you know, we don't have time limits here for our scenario for this court, but
Mm.
in normally what would happen is we might look to the appeal court rules, which states that you've got 7 days from the motion that you are trying to support to file the document. Now, the motion that they're supporting is Blake Lively's motion to dismiss, which happened back in
Hmm.
March or April. So we are well out of time for
Right.
that if we were in an appeal court rule. But we're not. So the judge has discretion over whether he accepts that rule and says, no, I'm not going to accept it, or whether he says, no, I'm not going to accept it because he doesn't want to, or feels it's inappropriate for some reason.
Yeah.
He could also accept it, let them stay on the docket, but completely ignore them. Or he could accept them and read them and take the views into account, consider them. We're not going to really know if he's read them unless he actually specifically refers to them.
Right.
So that's how that's going to work. So I don't know if they're like even stay on the docket at this point. I feel like Friedman's made a really good point, and at the end of all of these amicus
Mm.
briefs, you get a sense that because they all come with their statistics, and here's the background, and this is why this is desperately needed.
Mm.
And I can't argue that reforms are definitely needed. But I think Friedman also sort of says, well, really, what they're doing is providing improper. They're trying to shoe in improper expert testimony, and when you hear the arguments kind of being made in support of Blake Lively, when they talk about her claims specifically, um, they are stating her claims as fact, and they're stating Wayfarer
Yeah,
don't their claim against her have no foundation, they're baseless, and they're stating that as a fact too. And I agree, it's completely inappropriate.
it doesn't even make sense.
No,
Yeah.
no, it doesn't. Because, like, if this is allowed to go through as it's being argued, because obviously the law has passed itself, but how it gets interpreted, because it's not been in front of any court before, so this is going to be a case of what's called first impression. So it
Mm,
could set a precedent, and the way that these amicus briefs specifically are arguing for the court to interpret section 47.1 would put people in a situation where they couldn't bring a lawsuit, and there seems to be no fail safe for
yeah.
false accusations.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that's super problematic. Yeah.
Yeah,
It will be interesting to see what the precedent is, and how people kind of move forward with that. And I really believe a lot, like in this consciousness perspective of this stuff happens on the big stage so that for everybody, we do start to, process and integrate with the experiences that we're having and really just kind of coming out of this Me Too environment that we were in. We're really learning that there are false accusations that happen. And how do we create protections for that as well, too, for all sides? And this is just
yeah.
digging a hole deeper away from that.
Well, exactly, and Wayfarer, the constitutionally, technically, Wayfarer does actually have rights. They have
Right.
due process.
Yeah.
I'm not, I'm not like clued on with the what amendment is what, but I'm pretty sure there's the fifth and
Mm.
possibly the I want to say the 14th. But
Oh,
like
yeah.
they're entitled to due process, right? And
Yeah.
there are there is there's also separation of powers as well. So judges are supposed to just apply the laws, and what they're
Yeah.
asking the judge here to do by kind of preventing her from going through this, what they refer to as abusive discovery process, is it would effectively create a law that even Section 47.1 itself doesn't do.
Right. Right, or it makes me
And
think
that's
even of sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, and that's an overstep for me. I find that,
100%. Right? We talk about like innocent until proven guilty, and essentially what she's saying is no, guilty because I said so.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And where does this, like my worry is like, as everything, where does this like start to expand? And if we set it as a bit of a precedent in one area, well, where's the next area going to be?
Yeah.
It could end up being, set as a, as well. This is we're now starting to look at cases, at
Yeah.
least civil anyway, as guilty and proven until proven innocent, which is an absurd situation to be in.
Totally. It really is. It's so backwards, and I think that that is why so many people are interested in this, is that there is this big implication that's occurring as well. Why not have, if you're so confident in your claim, why is there not one piece of evidence that you're willing to provide for it?
Yeah, and actually, she seems to be trying to prevent evidence from what I'm seeing, because
Yeah.
she's not cooperated with anything so far.
Right.
And like even the investigation, so Wayfarer have they've initiated a third party kind of law firm to investigate them as an employer,
Mm,
not whether she was sexually harassed or the merits of her claims. It's a legal obligation they have to, once they are aware of claims like this, or complaints, um, then they have to in it have conduct an investigation basically.
mm,
um that investigation looks at, has she made a complaint? If so, what procedures and processes were followed? What has this ever happened before? What can we do, to what recommendations, or what
Yeah.
actions do we need to take to prevent it happening again? So it looks at them as an employer. And
I
for me, that investigation is the biggest thing that could happen if there genuinely is a problem, that it would say safeguard people, women in particular, but safeguard people going forward who then go on to work with Wayfair. And now Blake Lively keeps saying, well, the set doesn't exist anymore. And that's true. The film set itself, as it was, does not exist. But Wayfair, as a company who have employees and work with
yeah.
contractors and various things, they still exist and they still make movies. So if there are problems with, the kind of the staff at the top of the chain, really, then it's almost in the public interest, really, to have that investigated, have a report compiled, and to kind of have things put in place if it's necessary, if the investigation shows that there's a problem. But
Yeah.
she seems quite intent on even stopping that,
No
which I don't
investigations, please.
know.
Yeah.
She doesn't want it, so
Yeah.
it's just yeah, I find it quite wild what's going on.
It's pretty sketchy. It doesn't even make sense, and because she's also what remember she came back to the set and she had all these, requirements for what would allow her to do that. So, there was no complaint prior to that? Who is it that she's offering to? Is that just like a was it a power move? Because that's what it feels like if there's actually no communication that's been had with higher ups about any type of complaint.
Yeah, and when you look at, because we went over this actually as well
Yeah.
yesterday. Um, if you look at this, so you got the 17-point demands, then you got the 30-point demands. Craftily, in her CRD complaint and in her lawsuit, she put the 30-point demands, which sound a lot worse at in the actual complaint document so you could read them, but the 17-point
Yeah.
demands were like as an exhibit attachment. But, and I've always said this, the 17-point demands, they, to me, they do not hit because that's the other thing, you've got to hit the definition of sexual harassment, the legal definition. So your claims must actually meet that level. They can't be just any old thing.
Right.
And what she's got in the 17-point demand list does not really hit that for me. It's about, well, I want to approve these body doubles. I want to approve this editor, this producer. I want this person. It's all about what she needed for the PGA, to be honest.
Right.
I want control over another fully grown adult nudity rider. I still don't understand that one.
That doesn't make
Um,
sense.
no, but for
Mm.
me, then when before she even came back, so they signed off on all of that 17-point list, which seemed perfectly. Now we know why it was drafted. It's not reasonable, but at the time, with no background knowledge, it didn't seem to be any. There was no. She wasn't alleging that anyone had done anything.
Ah,
She wasn't actually saying, I can't work with this person anymore. Do you know
yeah,
what I mean? She wasn't
right.
saying all these things were happening. But then at the meeting that they had, and she still hadn't come back to work, so nothing else had happened. And then they had the meeting at her house, where she apparently read the 30 demands off
Wow.
her phone, but never presented it as a document and never asked them to sign anything. And for me, if you were really concerned, then why is that list not baked into a binding contract that you've got a signature on? Does that make sense? Why the
It does.
17 points and not the 30 points?
Yeah, that are the 17 points that are not even related to what it is that you're now complaining about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. That's my, yeah, because it doesn't seem. I'm not seeing anything in all the documentation, in all the text messages and emails that either party has attached where I'm sitting there thinking, oh yeah, she actually complained about something
yeah.
and that sounds like sexual harassment. I'm just not seeing a thing.
Not at
And in
all.
fact,
Not at all.
she
Yeah.
seems to be, I feel like for me, the fact that she called an actor, she referred to an actor as just a friend when the guy is clearly an actor and has pretty good credentials was
Yeah.
troubling enough.
Very. Yeah. It says a lot about where she was at with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's really disturbing, and it feels like it just overshadows survivors and the justice system. Why is there no expression of care? I just don't understand. Although at this point, I think when you think about it from like a narcissistic perspective, it's all about saving her reputation. And how do you save your reputation when it's basically gone at this point? You have to try to get these bigger people. Like, something that narcissists often will do is say, like, everybody knows that you did this, right? And I think almost like bringing on these advocacy groups is saying that, saying, look at, everybody is saying that you're an abuser, but it has no
Yeah.
actual say in the case or the situation.
Yeah, and I think and yesterday's amicus curiae, I think that bothered me the most actually. Ugh, I mean, I didn't love Elise Dorsey's, to be honest, but
Hmm.
'cause she just seemed to be talking about her own story. And when you look into her story, with the greatest respect, it doesn't sound like sexual harassment. It sounds like the woman had an 11-year-long affair
Oof.
whilst they were both married and fully grown adults, consenting adults.
Yeah.
And when he dumped her, she accused him of sexual harassment, and he brought a defamation claim, and they settled. And I always say a settlement is not an admission of liability.
No. Right.
Um, but she did pay him the money. It wasn't the other way around. And she's
Ah.
bringing her story saying, "Well, that wouldn't have happened had this law been in place."
Right.
Okay, but you know, again, I'm struggling when I read her story to see sexual harassment.
Yeah.
Um, Yesterday's amicus curiae was all about DARVO,
Hmm.
and they were asserting DARVO as if it was some kind of legal term, an accepted legal term, and it's not.
No.
But are you able to kind of do you know much about DARVO from your perspective?
Yeah, I know a little bit about it for sure. And, so it stands for deny, attack, and reverse victim offender. And usually this is something that happens where when you are with an abuser, they might turn around and say things like, you made me do it, right?
Yeah,
Or kind of that sort of the denial and the reversal back on you. And sure, that does happen in abuse cases and sexual harassment cases, but there's also, as we're like really learning and kind of digging into right now, needs to be an opportunity to truly defend and provide evidence for why as well. So there's a difference between being in a dynamic of abuse and experiencing DARVO and being in a court case or a legal system and wanting to defend yourself. That's
yeah,
what I'm
yeah.
yeah.
I feel the same, and I'm not. I mean, I don't know if I've quite got this wrong. Obviously, I mean, I went through all of that myself.
Yeah.
But I was in a situation where, we lived together, we were married, so, and I've always thought of it as, like the intimate kind of partner relationship is
Right.
unique, and that's where you would see Darbo the most.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I'm struggling with, I'm really struggling to see. I'm sure it does happen, but I just don't see it quite happening on set in
I
like a
don't
movie
think
set in the
so.
same way.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like that was a case here on set. I mean, again, right? So there would need to have been some sort of a complaint filed, some sort of a expression of I'm uncomfortable for there to have been a Darvo experience even. There isn't
Yeah.
any of that. Yeah.
No, exactly. And to me, it sounds like actually, like how could there have been, we'll take, from the point of the lawsuits being filed, because at that point it's defense, as far
Right.
as I'm concerned. Before then, was there really anything that would be classed as Darvo? Because to me, it sounded like she
Yeah.
got her way with everything.
Yeah. It feels like
It
she
does,
was using Darvo. to
Yeah.
get what she needed or what she felt like she deserved.
Well, she had a signed document, didn't she, of, which could fully be and has been misrepresented. She even did that in her CRD, by just by, with the visual of the image of what you see when you open it is the 30-point list, and then you say, and they signed this agreement, but the agreement is not that list. That's not what they agreed to. They agreed
Right.
to something which is attached something somewhere else. Not necessarily, you might
Yeah.
not necessarily have it. It wasn't in the actual memorandum of the actual complaint. It was an attachment of an exhibit somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I found that kind of is like a sleight of hand, which was quite misleading.
Yeah, it's so
Do you know what I
gaslighty.
mean?
Very.
Very gaslighting. And people believed that that was what Wayfarer had agreed to, was the 30-point, because of the way it was laid into the complaint.
Yeah.
Um, I yeah, I'm kind of, I'm not sure really, like, I mean, the other thing is we've got some information which some of it is being is we've obviously confirmed. Is more coming out, but we've
Yeah.
got the amazing sleuths are doing their doing their stellar job and finding
For real.
connections. And I think one comment I made in response to someone was, it feels like Blake Lively is being incredibly like a really difficult client, and her law firm, the publicist law firm, have gone through their Filofax or address book and gone searching for any organizations who support these causes where they have done some pro bono work for, or made a donation, or someone from the two law from all of the law firms combined is sitting on a board somewhere, and they've not disclosed these links.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I think needs to be disclosed. It's an important
Yeah,
piece of pie.
I think so. I mean, they do put in a disclaimer saying no one from the law firms or the parties have commissioned for this report, but that's not quite the same.
Yeah. Well, and who is funding these as well, right? Especially some of those individuals. Is there, I mean, they do still have to speak with a lawyer to get their situations filed, right? And so I am curious who's financing that.
Well, I mean, I would imagine that the organizations, the charities, and what various things. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know, so it's speculation, but I would imagine that they are using some kind of funds, or they are generously donating their time.
Uh-huh.
Um, Elise Dorsey, I'm not sure. I know I've seen that she's got a GoFundMe. I'm not saying she's used that for this purpose, but you
Sure.
know, I don't really know who's funding all of this, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure they would keep it secret for sure as well.
Yeah,
It does feel so exhausting though, and I know, I can't imagine how the judge feels, like nothing's even happened yet, and there's so much back and forth, and s that is just such an energy of what going through DV is like as well. It is so fatiguing. And I don't know, I've seen
yeah.
people in the comments sometimes also being like, "Can we sue for emotional distress at this point?" And I so laugh at that, but I agree. It's just constant and upsetting.
Yeah, no, I mean it's hard because it feels like, like as someone myself,
Yeah,
like there have been moments where covering this has kind of been really hard.
yeah,
When Jen Abel, when what was going on with her phone, the fact that Stephanie Jones was still kind of accessing the data, even though she had a whole new device. I think she hadn't unsynced it is still uploading to the iCloud, which
mm,
was attached to the worker phones that she had. And I think reading when it came out that in her amended complaint that actually Stephanie Jones was still, as of January this year, several months after she left the firm, was still accessing all of that private personal
Wow.
information, and that hit a nerve with me massively, and that was one of the hardest videos I've ever had to film. I think it took about 8 retakes to get over.
Oh,
In my situation, my ex-husband, there was a lot of technology involved, and,
wow.
um, there was over 70 various apps that monitored me and controlled the phone,
Wow.
um, all the way down, even remotely, and he actually had more access to the phone miles away than I did when it was in my hand.
That's
So,
terrifying.
it was really terrifying, but
Mm,
talking about that then, like, I
yeah.
I could actually sit and physically feel what she must have felt like to find that out,
Yeah. Yeah.
even though I mean, with me, it was my personal phone. With her, obviously, the phone belonged, but she'd given it back, walked away from the company. I think she thought that the ties were severed. I think you can imagine it was probably a huge shock to
Ugh.
find out that all that information was still being, relayed to especially Stephanie Jones of all people, because she sounds. Every time I think of her, I imagine someone like Cruella de Vil, to be honest.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, it's incredibly triggering. It's triggering for survivors and for people who've had experiences like this. And so, I'm sorry for your experience and that we're all having to basically relive our own experiences through this and be reminded of that and be taken back there when it feels also like there's like a mockery being made about it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
Um, what we had some requests for some advice um on X
Yeah.
about how people. Is there anything you can kind of
Definitely.
say?
Yeah. So there was a question about, what could survivors who are feeling triggered by this content do? And I just wrote a couple gentle reminders that you could kind of sit with and take care of yourself with. One being that no public narrative can erase your experience and that you know your truth. So, really allowing yourself to feel that and be with it. I also think even though we're so obsessed with this case and it could be so exciting adrenaline, starting for us to follow, it's okay to limit your exposure. It's okay to mute, it's okay to block and to log off and to come back to what part of me is being triggered, to really just sit with the parts of yourself that are needing care, not judgment in that moment, and of course to be doing grounding work for your nervous system, really doing breath work, having your hand on your heart, inhale, exhale, affirming that you're safe now in this moment. You're not back then. You are right here and it's okay. Those deep breaths can really shift you out of that spiral. And of course, really
Yeah.
just being able to talk to someone, whether that is a therapist or a specialist or it's someone who can just really see you and hold space for you, reach out to someone. I think so much of the time we think these public things aren't impactful, but again, we're seeing, right? It is triggering our own experiences. And so honor that within yourself. And also just make space for joy and, safety in whatever way that means to you. We cannot just be consumed 24/7 by the negative or the darkness. Light a candle, drink a warm tea, sit with your blanket, do something comforting that allows you to remember that you're safe and you're not in danger and that you're not alone, you're not crazy, you're not too sensitive, and you're allowed to feel okay and good too.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's all absolutely amazing advice, and stuff that I need to get a better handle on this, because this case is there's different courts, there's 5 dockets, there's 16 parties, and those are the parties. We're now getting a bunch of non-parties as well, and things are
Absolutely.
being filed so quickly that, if I'm being completely honest, I wake up, the first thing I do is what come out overnight, because I'm in a different time zone. So it's like, well,
Right.
I'm not even going to get breakfast. I'm not kind of getting myself up and like, right,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to do this and take care of myself before I look at this. And it's straight for, oh, I got to deal with these filings now and get my threads and stuff up. And then,
Oh,
sometimes the courts are wide open then and stuff's coming down and I might miss dinner, and things like that. And I think I need to take better care of myself. But I
Yeah.
am mindful of other people. And I think that's why, a big reason actually, why I approach my content delivery the way I do,
Yeah.
with humorous gifts, or, I'll throw in some snark here and there.
Yeah.
I try, as much as I am Team Baldoni, because
Yeah.
not because I particularly I'm fangirling the person. It's because that's where
No.
the evidence, what I've seen, has led me to that opinion. And I'm very open to shifting again should some evidence come out to support Blake Lively's claims,
Totally.
100%. But I do also make a point of trying to explain all of this in a way where, even if there's praise due on the Lively side, and that's any of the Lively parties, I will give them praise, and I will say that.
Yeah.
If I think Wayfarer have made a mistake or done something bad, I will say that. And I try to be
Yeah.
not I try to be as impartial when, I state what's going on as it is, whether I like it or not. But I do, to help me to kind of
Yeah.
help, try and get it across, and in a way that people can look at it, read it, and digest it with the least kind of triggering as possible. That's
Yeah.
where my gifts come in. That's where color coding, or I change my
Yeah.
colors for my highlighter. I try to do little things like that to almost make it a bit not childlike, because this is not a this is
No.
very adult topics here, but just to try and take some of the oh, what's the word? Take some of
Yeah.
the kind of the
Seriousness of it, or it really brings some levity,
yeah,
you know?
yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah, it's just, and try to
Heavy.
put it in a format where people will feel a little bit more comfortable, to read it. And then when I do my actual thread, well, I've got all these pages which I got color coded things, and then even when I don't even use the words or the colors. I'll use like colorful hearts that match with
Yeah.
the color of the, and it's daft little things, but it's for me, when I read it, when I was doing it and I come up with the idea, I was like, and it was just something that developed actually, but when I looked at it, I was like, oh, that's quite cute.
It
and
is.
I thought the little hearts are quite sort of, symbolic of love, really.
Right.
And that's why I tried to do that.
Yeah.
I've got a question here. So I've just been asked, from an Indigenous perspective, Brett is curious about the inner child dynamic. Can you
Yes. Yes,
say
I
that?
love this question, and we talked about it on my show, as well as I have a Substack that really broke this down. I really see this as this inner child ego. There's so much wounding that comes out, honestly, from all sides. From Blake's side, what I really saw was this inner child wound of like not being seen, not feeling like they've gotten enough, and jumping into this like, let me take control then, right? Let me take control because I'm not going to get what I want, so I need to take it. And unfortunately, these kinds of, when we're led from these actions and egoic places in our wounds, it can really lead to self-sabotage. And I think at the same time, I saw that for Justin Baldoni as well too, being like a lesser name and maybe feeling like, seeing her and feeling like, oh, we just got this bit Blake Lively on, and giving his power away a little bit too easily. I think Ryan is also really involved with that. His inner child wounds really showed in his desire for control and insecurity coming out. I think something I really see in him is that Justin Baldoni is such a different type of a man, like this open, vulnerable. And I think that that would be really triggering for someone like Ryan Reynolds, who's often, posting the worst pictures of his wife and calling that something nice, or making these jokes about it. And whatever you want to call it, his humor, that's fine. But when you think about this and you see someone who's different than you, it is going to trigger these wounds within yourself too. And so I really saw it as this like battle of egos, and that does come
Yeah,
from not being as in your highest self. So I really hope that there can be some healing for them through this too, although the way that they've been moving through this case is very much just grounding deeper into the egoic state and the wounding versus being able to have some healing.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's how, I completely agree with that. I mean, because I was going to actually ask you as well for your kind of view on. I've seen people saying they think that Ryan Reynolds is the one that's kind of driving Blake Lively's movement, and she's the victim to him. And
Yeah.
I can see why. But I also think that I wouldn't go as far as to say that she is some kind of wallflower that,
No.
has no ability to speak up for herself, to stand up for herself. I think there may be some kind of competing between them for, I think she wants what
Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds managed to get and is trying to get it the same way. Does that make some sense? But
It
I don't
does
know. What do
make
you think?
sense. Yeah, I mean, I don't think she's a victim to him. I think that if anything, she's almost inspired by him, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah,
And so he could be really lighting that fire beneath her where she's feeling like she wants that, she deserves it, but she hasn't gotten it. And so she's trying to get it for herself. Even like she said in that interview, the Forbes interview, I think it was, right? I come on as an actress, but then I just, I take up all the space. But that's not what you were hired for. And if that's what you're wanting, there is a path to get it. And is that path to getting it a little bit more difficult? Yeah, but that's how the world is, right? You don't steal things from people. And actually, I mean, I think I learned through this process that Ryan stole Deadpool to a certain degree as well too. So she is very much, I think,
yeah.
mirroring him and learning from him in this style.
Well, I mean, the person whose question I put up about the inner child,
Mm.
there's been elements of some of his work, and him and his wife's work has been stolen by Ryan Reynolds. The dog, the look of Dogpool, it comes from Brett's actual service dog, because Brett
Oh,
was on the set of Deadpool 2. He was a stand-in and um like a stand-in and a stunt double. So he has worked with Ryan Reynolds, and from that point on, stuff his intellectual property was actually stolen. So there is history. It's not even limited to just Deadpool or
right.
to It Ends With Us. But I feel like, I mean, what with the whole news, with the whole news, like there seem to be like with the promotion and everything, there seemed to be an awful lot of name dropping, and then you have the whole Dragons and Khaleesi speech. What kind of person do you think it makes Blake Lively to try to extort her best friend and
Oh,
someone as big as Taylor Swift?
it just shows like it's a narcissist who's lost everything, right? You've got nothing left and you're willing to take down everyone with you. And I think that's really it's so embarrassing and it says a lot about how insecure she truly is inside to be able to do that. Anything to uphold this reputation that she's created for herself and I'm a Swiftie and it does make me feel bad. I feel like how can you ever trust anyone when these people who are supposed to be the closest to you are willing to throw you under the bus to protect themselves? It really is sad and I think it's a sad person, a broken person, a wounded person who's willing to do that.
Right, and I was like at the time as well, especially when the news came out that she'd actually gone through her lawyer. She got her lawyer to get hold of Taylor Swift's lawyer. For me, with my background, I I find that so. I was really shocked because I was convinced, no, that can't be right. There's no way a lawyer, obviously, there's not no way, but I find it really troubling the suggestion that a lawyer would do that and basically bring the profession into disrepute.
Yeah,
But it turned out that was actually what happened, and I was it just made me really kind of disappointed in
very.
that that a lawyer is not advising Blake Lively better.
Yeah. Or is she just does she just not listen to anyone?
Yeah, but I mean, Mike Gottlieb still would have had a choice on whether he, made that phone call to
Yeah.
Venable, to sort of say, if your client doesn't do this, we're gonna release all of these text messages. He is a grown man. He still would have had his own choice on, am I going to do this or am I going to say, no, I'm not prepared to do that. Find someone else.
That's so true. That's so true. I wonder too if just for all of them, like there's this allure of celebrity that impacts their decision making,
Yeah,
which you think,
I think so.
right? And you would hope that for a lawyer that wouldn't be the case, but I think ultimately they're human too, and there's something about that.
Yeah, because I found that as well when I watched the Depp Heard trial. Now, what all through
Yeah.
that, Elaine Bredehoft, Amber Heard's lawyer, looked utterly ridiculous and amateurish on the
Mhm.
stand. But she's such a good lawyer.
Hmm.
She's really a good lawyer and in so many other cases she does so well. And you know, I I think, she was being asked to do things. You got a demanding client. I've seen it. You get a demanding client who wants you to do this and do that, and as long as it's, I mean, yes,
Yeah.
there is always, you can say no and invite them to take their business elsewhere.
Right.
But with when you got high profile celebrities, well, and it's a $400 million case.
Yeah.
As was with for Amber Heard's lawyer, it's a case against Johnny Depp. It
Right.
brings eyes on the firm. If you can win this, it brings money in and a good, it boosts your reputation.
Totally.
But I think she all but killed her career myself. And I
Yeah.
think that all the stuff that's coming out with the Van Zandt subpoena, the extortion of Taylor Swift, and all the other little things that are coming out about the law firms who are acting for Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, it's not making them look good.
No, it's not. No, they look embarrassing and small if that's the case as well too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean we have like Leslie Sloane's lawyers as well, Sigrid McCauley. She's actually really, really good at, her background is pretty incredible work. She, managed to win damages for the Epstein victims, and she did all of that work for free.
Yeah.
She did an absolutely phenomenal job. I have so much respect for her, but during this case, one of the first things she did was to say that her her female client who has a female owned business should not be subject to this lawsuit for no other reason than the fact that she's female.
I mean,
And I think from there on, my head's just been in my hands with her.
no, we cannot be living that way. That does not make sense.
I have a question here as well. How can you tell the difference between situational narcissism and narcissism that isn't just a coping mechanism for fame?
This is interesting. Yeah. I mean, narcissism that isn't just a coping mechanism for fame. I wonder what they mean by that as well, too. Like, does that mean protecting their ego, protecting their name? I think if that's the case, then, ultimately it would be seeing there is a certain amount of protecting your ego that I think you could hold for being famous or for being a person, but true narcissism is going to show through anyway. And I don't know that there could really be situational narcissism. I think you would code that as something else. Like maybe somebody having a big ego or being really arrogant or denying what's really going on in the moment. But I think something that we've seen here is that it's a pattern and a chain of events. So that I think would be the main difference to look for. Is have there been previous behaviors like this or is it just around I don't know wanting to protect your ego or your name?
Yeah, that makes complete
Yeah.
sense. With
Yeah.
with Ryan Reynolds, though, he's kind of getting himself into a lot of things now. I mean, half of it, I almost look at and think he's taken on an awful lot with all the companies he's kind of got up and running and things to deal with.
Yeah.
Um, but it also puts him in a situation where, like his so with Deadpool, for instance, he kind of managed to push the director out and get himself in in a good situation where essentially
Right.
he had the kind of the power of the franchise itself. And then he
Uh,
brings it he has his marketing advertising business, which then does all the marketing for the film. And it's like, well, there's a lot
Yeah.
of power there. You're controlling an awful lot of things, and certainly with the Angel Us, we look at everything that Blake Lively, all the roles that she took over and took control of on
Yeah.
the film, pushed the actual director and producer out of the way. Had I don't know what she said to Sony, that's yet to come out, but obviously she either extorted them or somehow gained their support then and used them as leverage.
Right.
But on top of that, then with the marketing, she had her husband's company do all that as well, and completely pushed the lead star, the director, and the
Yeah.
person who owned the rights to the books out of the way. How does someone? I mean, I
Yeah.
can't imagine that the 17-point demand is just
Yeah.
that. Do you think there was something from Justin Baldoni's side? I don't want to call it a weakness, but like his personable.
I do really think that though too, right? I think that that was just
Yeah,
not seeing himself in the correct light either, so to speak, right? Is like you own this, you're bigger than this, you can do this, right? But it seems
yeah,
like there was like he was so quick to just kind of say, okay, okay, you can do whatever you want. And yes, when you're, dealing with someone who has this big name and all of this power behind them, it is scary, right? You don't want to lose your chance, you don't want to lose your name, but I think that if he had been able to stand a little bit more for himself, that maybe it wouldn't have gotten this far, right? Or like given so much leeway, even thinking about those text messages where she's wanting to rewrite the script and going over and over again. It could have been perfectly fine, in my opinion, to say, like, you're an actor on this film, and I appreciate that you have an interest in writing, but we don't have room for that right now. Period.
yeah. But she did spin it though as, well, I'm a woman and I keep getting passed over, and she did kind of play that kind of card that, well, I just want to have some input, but
Yeah.
my experience has been, I've been looked over for all of these things, or
Yeah.
so on and so forth, and that's without the threat of the dragons. But
Totally.
she actually did kind of place herself as a bit of a victim in terms of she never gets the opportunities and the chance.
Yeah, she started in that way, and I mean, and again, right, like him coming from his desire to help women and lift women up, and like, so did she kind of use that against him, and it
Yeah,
unfortunately worked and backfired.
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
we know that there was an established friendship between Ryan Reynolds and Liz Plank, who was the co-host of Justin Baldoni's podcast. So um, we know that Liz Plank also was credited by Blake Lively for getting her the role. And
Oh,
we have seen an interview where Blake Lively, when she was asked why she wanted to do it, she started the sentence with, "Well, it looked like a good franchise opportunity."
oh my, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's all being pieced together.
Yeah, yeah. She knew what
So
she was doing from the beginning, or what her
yeah,
goal
yeah,
was.
I feel like that was the actual, yeah, that was the goal. She was very difficult. But then you had Ryan Reynolds then, who didn't want to be separated from her, because if you look at,
Yeah,
she disappeared during the strike, but then the day that it was announced that Deadpool was about to restart filming, she sent her, "I'm not coming back to work unless you agree to all of these demands," the 17-point demand, on the same day. And
yeah.
then she somehow managed to delay going back. That was in the November. Then she delayed going back until January, after Deadpool had finished filming. And then Ryan Reynolds was on set with her almost the whole time.
So strange. Yeah, it's a very
Do you think
strange
that's it?
thing.
I mean, we had the messages as well, like Ryan Reynolds messaging Justin Baldoni, literally asking this director to move his entire movie schedule, where
Yeah,
you've paid out money, you've booked everyone, you've got licenses and various permits already all in place, ready to go. And Ryan Reynolds sort of saying, "Well, can you just shuffle things along for me so my film, I can do my film, because we don't like being separated." Do you think there's something in that, like with there's like a separation anxiety with him?
Definitely. I mean, I think that's very strange, right? Ryan Reynolds, of all people, you should know how the industry works, right? You can't ask someone to
Yeah.
push this. What kind of a request is that, you know? Perhaps there is something deeper going on between them that makes it hard for her to be away. I can understand wanting to be together, but also you're working, right? And so there has to be some
Yeah.
reality to that. Yeah.
Obviously, because Justin Baldoni was, we saw in one of his texts that, he had just left his wife and kids at home to come back to film. This is what adults do. But
That's what you
I,
do.
yeah, I found like when I look through the messages and then you look at the timelines, because that's what we took when the metadata was found and the amended complaint was
Yeah.
out,
Mhm.
and with it come this Annex A. It was essentially a lot of us as the kind of internet sleuths all took that as a bit of a present from Brian Friedman of this is a timeline,
Yeah.
go see what you could. And my God, the stuff we have dug up between all us as a community has been incredible. But
It has.
when we looked at the timelines of, well, what happened the day this email, this request came from her lawyers, and it was like, oh, Deadpool began filming again, and she was still unavailable.
Yeah.
And she managed to just keep pushing back, and then she had to have a meeting. But by then, Deadpool had just wrapped, and
Yeah.
when you put it all together, the impression I got of Ryan Reynolds was he's incredibly needy and insecure.
So insecure, right? And then you think about how they met on set, right? And they had these feelings, and sure, they say nothing happened till later, right? But I think he probably did feel triggered by Justin Baldoni being an attractive man. You're sending your wife off to do this romantic role, so to speak, right? That's the industry, right? So you got to deal with that
Yeah,
within yourself. But if you are insecure, you're going to be more controlling around it.
yeah, no, definitely. And I do wonder if there was a bit of there's a lot of Justin Baldoni that Ryan Reynolds wishes he was more like.
I think so. Yeah.
Because it struck me that with the portrayal of Nice Pool in particular, like, I mean, it wasn't a surprise, and Ryan Reynolds, I suppose he didn't outright say yes, this is Justin Baldoni, but he did not deny the accusation in the complaint either.
No.
So I suppose, but the thing is both Nice Paul was clearly presented on screen as a overly nice person who apologizes for their very existence and even their death. They apologize, and
Yeah.
just someone who was, kind of, you know, really passive, and very considerate of others. Which sounds like Justin Baldoni, but also because I went through Blake Lively's Instagram, and I found her taking, it was like a post of all the things that she personally took credit for inspiring across all of the Deadpool films. And one of them was quoted as nice guys who use feminism as a tool.
Yeah.
And I thought that's an odd way to describe Justin Baldoni, because it was clearly about Justin Baldoni. It was clearly referring to Nice Pool, the
Yeah.
inspiration for Nice Pool. So it was hers.
Yeah.
But to refer to the person who inspired that as nice men, and I'm thinking, but you're now trying to sell to us, the public, that he's a monster and he made
Right.
you so fragile you couldn't get out of bed.
Yeah. It's so silly and clearly was such a triggered response to create a character like that to put in, right? Is this you something that made you feel less than and you're trying to make fun of and make smaller? It's so childish, really.
I mean, what do you think? What did you think of that though? The as a if as a response, like for if a man, if is Brian Friedman right? Like if when he says, well, if your wife has been through something like sexual harassment and has been traumatized, you don't go and make fun of it. I know people use humor to cope, but
Yeah.
that's for me. It felt like a long way away from humor, because that was just worldwide bullying,
No, I
and
agree.
they mocked everything about him.
Yeah.
It just
No.
I
It
didn't
doesn't
feel that there was a sense of trauma there
not at
or
all.
concern.
No, or concern, exactly. It just felt like something you didn't like that bothered you, and now you're trying to make a joke out of, versus if something has been really impactful, if your wife is devastated over something, you're not joking about it, at least not right away. Maybe in years'
No.
time.
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, you then you kind of turn it to your advantage, but I mean, at the time that was
yes,
filmed, that was real time almost,
it was.
if their allegations are true.
Yeah. I don't think that I don't think that they've tried to hide that Nice Pool is Justin Baldoni, right? I mean, from the man bun to the flower shop behind him, they very much wanted to send the message of who this is without saying so.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, yeah, when you put it all together, and then there was the line, was Cafe Gratitude, which was also used to describe Justin Baldoni in Blake's amended complaint.
Hmm.
So you couldn't deny the link really of that, but
No.
and that line was actually um it was uh it was redone later on because there are actually it wasn't the original scripted line, and it wasn't even the line that was used in the promotion, so that was then added again later on. But yeah, I found that a bizarre reaction
Yeah.
for anyone. I know, like, if um like, if something, I don't know, something like that had happened to my mum, for instance, my dad would not be laughing and joking about it,
Oh, if
or
anything,
treating
they
it with any
feel
kind of humor.
right, these things they feel embarrassing, they feel shameful. I'm not saying you should, you keep it to yourself and they need to be secret, but you certainly aren't blasting it in front of your billion-dollar movie. It's inappropriate and it's strange.
Especially as Easter eggs as well, because they weren't actually coming out and saying, "Well, this is all stuff that happened to my wife."
Yeah,
So it was like it was treated as an inside joke between them all.
yeah. Which makes sense for his type of humor and the banter that they have, right? And that takes me back to I think what I was saying before is that he's really triggered by the openness and the vulnerability of the kind of man and masculinity that Justin Baldoni puts out into the world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think so, and the way he elevates women as well.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I don't know, the pair of them, they just seem so almost weirdly grossed out by, kindness. It's like
Totally.
it's foreign to them.
Yeah. Yeah. How about some endearing comments? I love my wife. No, it's always she's the ugliest person, or what did he say? He said on once on a talk show that once she had her kids, he'd shoot her to save his daughter. It's like,
Yeah,
okay,
nice.
yeah,
Yeah, that's I mean, I suppose people can have in their marriage a weird humor towards each other.
yeah,
Um, I, that's fair enough, but
yeah,
yeah, I think there needs to be a fine balance really. But from what I've learned about this from the messages and everything, and we'll learn a lot more as well when things start being coming through on Discovery. But my view is that Ryan Reynolds is the one that is quite dependent almost on his wife,
yeah,
and has his mum around as well quite a lot for a man of his age. I
yeah,
mean, she was even in the marketing of
right,
the end of like, what has she got to do with this film?
yeah,
I didn't understand it.
right. No, it was strange. It this case continues to be extremely interesting, and I really look forward to the other pieces that come up so that we can all fully just learn more and integrate with these experiences within ourselves. And regardless of what happens, it has been such a learning opportunity, I think. And
Yeah,
I do
no,
hope that Ryan and Blake learn from it as well.
brilliant. Well, I know you're short of time and you've got somewhere to be, so I'm
Yeah.
gonna leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you join me again soon, and I will obviously love to come back onto yours as well.
Yes, I would
But I
love
think
that.
it's been
Thank you.
interesting to yeah, I think it's been interesting to kind of put the two perspectives from myself from the legal, yourself from the sort of
Yeah.
more psychological side of things, um, regarding these issues, and just look at, well, what is going on in this case, you know?
Yeah,
So,
I
I
really think
appreciate
so.
that.
Thank you. It's been so nice to do, and I think it is cool to kind of bring these 2 essences together essentially and try to make sense of what's going on, and I hope to do it
Yeah.
again.
And I've left some links as well in the description for people to go and have a look at your Substack. And
Oh,
yeah, I
thank
know you
you.
have got a YouTube channel. I don't know how active that is, but
Not so much. Yeah, I'm not really big on YouTube, but I do have a Substack and I'm on Instagram where I talk a lot about these things too. And our episode's going to be coming out next week. It's unfortunate my timing on things though too, because there's always just so much coming up. So we definitely will have to talk again soon.
oh yeah, no, definitely. Well, anytime, obviously, just let me know.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for your time and your input. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. Me too.
Okay, well, I'll see everyone really soon. Thank you, Rox, and I'll speak to you again soon.
See you. Bye.
Bye.